Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we're here to talk about the full moon that's coming up this weekend, like we usually do for these major lunations. Of course, we'll be wanting to see what the cosmic currents have to tell us about what's going on in our own individual lives and in the life of the culture that surrounds us. So we will be taking a look at that. Wait for a minute for people to join, but I think we're just going to go right ahead and we're going to go right to the chart now. Okay, here we go. So you should be able to see the chart, and this is in the Time Passages software. We use a particular setting for showing these charts, which is called the natural chart. In other words, we're not looking at a chart that has the normal ascendant over at the far left-hand side of the chart, which ascendant happens to be indicated in the software by this symbol here, which is showing a horizontal line representing the ascendant of the chart. It's actually a 15-degree Virgo ascendant, but we're showing everything from the standpoint of Aries. It makes it easier to talk about, and it's also location neutral, meaning that if you're looking at this from New York or from Europe or from where we are, which is in California, any way you look at it, anywhere you're living, I mean, you can look at it the same way as what's in Aries, what's in Taurus, what's in Gemini. So that's a very handy way to look at things from the standpoint of as though we were looking at it for an Aries rising, like if the person was an Aries rising person, or even if the person had an Aries sun, we would also be able to look at a chart like this and say, well, you've got an Aries sun, so you're affected in this way by the chart of Aries and then Taurus and then Gemini. So representing the first, second, and third house. So we will look at this new moon and the first full moon, and the first thing we'll want to do is consider how the moon itself, the sun and the moon, relates to the other planets in the chart. And I'm specifically concerned with how everything relates to this Saturn, Pluto that we have at the top of the chart in Capricorn, 23 degrees now, 20 and 14 minutes. So it's slightly a little bit wider than it was at the new moon, which was 2.5 degrees. Remember that they're quite closely parallel as well. And we can show the parallel in the Time Passages software like even more of a conjunction than they already are. The fact that they're 2.5 degrees apart, they're quite closely conjunct. And in addition to that, the parallel really brings them into prominence. So we've been seeing what I consider to be major structural transformation of the whole society, which you'd expect from the Capricorn sign, the Saturn ruling Capricorn, representing society, representing structure, the structure of the society, and then the Pluto. When we have Pluto-Saturn, we've been talking about this. For example, 9/11 was Pluto opposite Saturn. We see major structural changes coming down, and of course that was a big change moment for this American society in September 11th of 2001, when in fact if you look at the USA chart, it turns out that Saturn and Pluto were across from each other along the ascendant-descendant of the United States chart. So that was kind of a big moment for this country. Now we have another kind of big moment in this closing years of the teens, the decade of the teens. We see that Saturn and Pluto are coming together. They're not exact now, and Saturn's moving further and further away from Pluto, but as we see the new year come, 2020, January 2020, early January of 2020, we are going to see Saturn and Pluto exactly conjunct, and then furthermore, by the end of the year, Jupiter comes to join them by November 2020. Sound familiar? At that particular time, Jupiter will be in a triple conjunction with Pluto and Saturn, and that will be quite remarkable, a change moment for the whole society, for not only this culture, this American society, but also for the entire Western culture that we're observing through the lens of the astrology and the astrological timings and astrological configurations. So I'm curious about how this Pluto-Saturn is playing out in these early months, the spring months, I should say, of 2019. And my question is always, lately, what is the effect of the new moon and the full moon on these two planets? And we'll be looking at that as the next few weeks and months unfold. Even though they're slowly moving apart from each other now, it'll be more dramatic by the end of the year. And what we do see is that the sun and moon, in opposition to each other, at 27 degrees of an Earth sign, the sun located in Taurus, makes a trine and a sextile. So that is another indication that this Pluto-Saturn is quite powerful now. And we can see the changes in the society if we look around. I'm sure everybody's well aware that stuff is happening, where things are kind of up in the air and very dire, and there could be war on the horizon. So these are things to pay attention to and be concerned about. And in this full moon chart also, we do see that Mercury at 24 degrees of Taurus is exactly trine, pretty close trine, to the Pluto. Eris at 24 degrees of Aries is making that square. That's still very active. Haumea, one of these new planets that was named, a dwarf planet out in the Kuiper Belt, named along with Eris in 2006 and 2007 and 2008, was when these three new Kuiper Belt objects of Eris, Haumea, and Makemake became named as planets. They're big in the Kuiper Belt. They're as big as Pluto. All three of them are, Eris is just as big as Pluto, and Haumea and Makemake are slightly smaller. But these are definitely intense, and we know that Pluto is very intense in Western astrology. These have some intense results when we look at the chart, or you could say a parallel symbolism to what's going on in the culture and in ourselves. So that T-square that's formed with Eris opposite Haumea beaming in on this 23-degree mark of Capricorn, which is where Pluto occupies, it's a very intense time for everything. And then, of course, we also see it, I don't know if I mentioned that also Mercury at 24 degrees Taurus is also in that same alignment, making a trine. So we have quite a bit of energy with this Pluto-Saturn, and I must say, I do think that this is a rather intense month that's unfolding. We saw that the Pluto-Saturn was very prominent in the new moon chart. We'll see that it's prominent again next month. So I just see that there's a whole bunch of cultural transformation that's going on. And I believe that one of the very important events is this recent announcement of an attempt to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is the abortion protection. That's a huge issue for both conservatives and for liberals. Liberals feel that the government is intruding on private health decisions for women and taking away women's right to choose. And on the other hand, a lot of the conservatives feel that abortion is a act against God that shouldn't be done. So those are the two conflicting points of view. And we have prominent Uranus now as well, so that we have both progressive and conservative ideas very prominent in our culture, in our thinking, in our thought process, no matter which side of that left and right divide in this country you find yourself on. And in fact, we do notice also with Uranus, here it is in Taurus, almost 4 degrees of Taurus, 3 degrees of Taurus in 59 minutes. And here we have, a quarter of a degree away, we have Venus in this full moon configuration. And we feel like the full moons and the new moons, and to some extent as well the quarter moons, are more powerful times when looking at the configuration tells you what's going on, how that cycle that began on May 4th is unfolding throughout the rest of this month. So now, considering that Venus is only with Uranus for a short time, it's moving on, but in this patterning, it's like this is the birth of the second half of the cycle. We can look at this birth chart for the second half of the cycle, and we can say, what is that going to be like? And we see that in this chart, Venus and Uranus are quite close together. So we understand, and also, of course, remembering that Venus rules Taurus, we understand that for anybody that's born a Taurus, and that's why we do sun sign astrology by looking at what's happening for Taurus, what's happening for Aries, like this chart. It's a very exciting time. It's a time when you're really going to be tuning into what is not a common theme for Taurus, which is the whole idea of a volatile and changeable situation trying to make your home on an escalator while it's moving. You can't tell exactly what's up and what's happening, and there's all new information coming at you all the time. And some signs like that better than others, and Taurus is not particularly comfortable with that, being an earth sign that's, likes to have things kind of settled, likes to be comfortable in their surroundings, like to have everything more stable. Here we have Uranus coming bang smack into the middle of that idea since the last few weeks. It's been re-entered Taurus a couple of months ago. And it's going to stay in Taurus for 7 years. So it's something that the whole society is getting used to. We say that there's going to be innovations of all kinds in the areas ruled by Taurus in the second house, which is to say the way we have our produce manufactured, the way we grow things in the soil, the way we have our luxuries in our lives, the way we have our resources and our finances. It predicts a volatility in the financial situation in the culture. The economy could go through fluctuations during this time, and probably will. And then, of course, also we want to look at Venus and the fact that Venus is connected to Chiron being at the very same degree of one sign over, so that's a semi-sextile. So we have a lot of pressure on the Venus right now. And in fact, we even have Haumea, one of these new planets, at 4 degrees. So that's making a connection to these two planets, to Chiron and to Venus, and also to Uranus. So all of these combined tell us that there's a lot of pressure on our relationships. We are simultaneously being asked to be innovative with our relationships, to think about possibilities, to think about what could be different in them, how we could expand on the idea of what we're up to in relationship. And also with Maki Maki. Now, Maki Maki is concerned with a spiritual connection to nature and taking activism, if necessary, to make that work for us. In other words, it's a good time to go out and make sure that the fields are in good shape, that crops can be grown with fulfillment, that it's sustainable. All the things that we consider with environmental concerns are very active right now, as you can see in the culture as well, with both Haumea and Maki Maki being activated, Haumea being right across from Eris. That's going to be very strong activation for Haumea, which is just the love of nature, and nature is a spiritual path. And then seeing Maki Maki also in the act also has to do with nature. They both do. These planets that are named after indigenous gods and goddesses, Haumea being the creation god of Hawaii, and Mother Pele. And so nature in all its forms, including difficult nature, like when the eruption happened recently and took away some territory in part of Hawaii, in the Big Island. And Maki Maki, I feel, is more activist. It has to do with taking a stand and being available for Earth issues. What does the Earth need from us? We're kind of in a cohabitation. It's our mother. We're here, and we're here only because of nature, only because nature supports us. And we have to pay attention to that. And of course, that's very, very crucial these days with global warming taking place as well, which all scientists agree on. So it's a very tough time, and we see Chiron across, which means it's kind of a painful time. And now in this full moon chart, we see Venus activated, which means the love of that nature. Venus also rules the 7th house of this chart, which is the Libra component of this chart, which means that there's a way that working with other people becomes really important right now in terms of working with climate change. And of course, obviously, working with other people is essential in order to work with climate change. So these are the kind of themes that are percolating through the collective right now. And I want to mention also that with Venus and Uranus so close together, anybody that is a Taurus is feeling that. They're feeling, whoa, this is a particularly volatile time. This is a time for revelation, a time for surprising events, unexpected circumstances. And what you want to do is you want to look at that in as wide a possible lens as you can. You want to see that as possibility rather than misery and things changing too fast. I mean, a little bit of that is true. Things are changing too fast. But, we also can take the attitude that life itself has changed, that we have to be nimble. We have to be able to go with the flow and balance surfing the situation, surfing the currents. And it would be true of any fixed sign, really, because if we look at the chart with Taurus on the ascendant, which is the way we do sun sign astrology, we're looking at this being the ascendant, descendant. But if we're looking at Leo, for example, if you're a Leo, then this would be the 10th house. So this would have to do with career and outer presentation and accolades and honors and how you show up in the world, how you're seen in a wider framework of others. That's important for Leos right now, and that is subject to change, all this volatility that's happening. Similarly, if you're a Scorpio, similarly, if you are an Aquarius, all of those fixed signs are actually going through quite a bit of changeability right now, and just seeing, more so than everybody else, seeing how things are really volatile and how that can be either seized upon and enjoyed as a way of working with nature, as a way of coming through, or you can decide to stay in the same situation, which doesn't work too well. You can't really get away from progress that's happening for you. So that's what I wanted to say about this full moon. I think that covers most of it. Mars just entered Cancer, which is also very interesting because Mars in Cancer, obviously that has to do with nurturing, that has to do with being a more strongly feminine person rather than a more strongly macho person and just ignoring areas of nurturing or ignoring the feminine side of yourself. It's time to be balanced in our male and female energies too. So I want to mention one more thing before we close, and that is I want to look at the chart for the USA. So here's the chart for the USA, and let's put the transits in there. Put current transits. We will want to look at actually a couple of days from now, right? So here we have the full moon represented by, again, the sun at 27 degrees of Taurus, the moon opposite at 27 degrees of Scorpio. And we're kind of curious, how does this hit the USA chart? Because that tells us something about what's going on. And the thing that's most prominent in this chart, I feel, one thing that we also want to mention is that Saturn is in Libra in the US chart. It's in the top of the chart in the 10th house. So that means both a strong executive and also the rule of law, does it not? Because you have Libra, which represents the law, the balance, the scales. And Saturn there indicates that it's a very important factor for this country to be balanced in the rule of law. And then we see it's been happening in the sky that Pluto and Saturn are together, and that brings the Saturn back into our consciousness as far as that being a powerful factor right now, including the powers of the executive, including the powers of the rule of law, which is something that's somewhat of a contention right now. But the thing I wanted to mention in this full moon happening with the USA chart is that at 27 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio, they make a perfect T-square to the moon in the US chart, which is 27 degrees of Aquarius. And this means the public. So, and with the third house, it also means communication. So what's happening right now is the messages are flying back and forth across the country about what's happening with not only the executive branch, the courts versus the Congress versus the executive branch, but also how that affects the public, but also what's happening with Roe v. Wade, with this Alabama law that is a deliberate attempt to challenge Roe v. Wade. They're saying abortion is illegal, just like it used to be. And there's a lot of public outcry about that, especially in liberal circles, especially women are feeling like they're not able to make their own choice. Everybody has their own opinion about this. I happen to be somebody that believes in female having the chance to choose. That's my particular belief. You can have yours, which I don't disagree with. Everybody's entitled to their feelings and what they think, what is important. But what we can see right now with this powerful connection to the moon in the U.S. chart is that the public is very, very concerned. The U.S. public is obviously just in a flurry right now of what is happening, what is going on, what is the likely consequence of all this. And it's an activist time. It's time for everybody to kind of stand up and be counted, as I've been saying all along with Eris being so prominent. Eris is a feminine warrior energy for standing up for what you believe, no matter what that is, standing up for it. So that was a little bit of a clue about this, and I don't know if anybody's tuned in to listen, if any questions have come in. No? Okay. Well, we'll just stop right there for now. And I just think these times that we're living through, so basically incredibly strange. And we have to navigate them as best we can, and we can just do the best we can. And the secret, I think, is to stay open and to consider all the possibilities, consider that even though it may look bad, it may be something that we require. It may be that although climate change is happening and it's a serious situation, it's also feedback. As noted environmentalist Paul Hawken loves to say, it's giving us feedback, and if you ignore the feedback of your body, you suffer. And if we're ignoring the feedback of the earth, we're going to continue to suffer from the consequences of that until we start paying attention to it. So that's something I'm very keen on, and I think everybody would be, no matter what your political persuasion. It's going to affect this culture so dramatically. It's really time to take action on that. So that's the big challenge of our times, I believe. And as always, we are here to try to help you navigate these times with our software, which does enable you to get the meanings out of your natal chart and also the transiting positions. And I think we've got the standard edition on sale this month. So you can pick up the standard edition at a good discount. And also, if you already have the basic edition, the upgrade to the standard edition is quite cheap right now. So you can get another level of interpretation. You can produce reports for your friends and for yourself. So that's it. It's kind of tough times, but we can always look at the positive side of it, which is that we have a chance to grow in character and in the way we contribute to the evolving society around us. Have a good couple of weeks. Talk soon. Bye-bye.